Hello and welcome aboard WhalePod to another Genshin Impact video. Today we're going to be doing my official review slash build sort of guide for Dia, as well as some updated recommendations for Cyno, as things have changed slightly since his first run. Although not as much as most reruns, because Cyno is getting his rerun a lot quicker than he probably should have. Cyno is not exactly the greatest character, and he was definitely a big disappointment for me, so I'm definitely extra disappointed that that 5-star Razor got a rerun when Eula so desperately needed one. Starting off, I did forget to level up talents in my last wishing session where we pulled for Dia, so I'm just going to show off that my Dia's talents are 9, 9, and 9. Her normal attack is pretty standard: normal attack, charge attack, plunge attack, nothing special to it. 4 hits, decent-ish scaling. Dia's numbers as a whole are not really all that great. But I want to say, without any physical damage bonus, already seen some pretty decent physical numbers for a normal attack. It's just, you know, very slow. Dia actually has 2 versions of her elemental skill. The first one is used if there is no Sanctum field on the field. It will deal AoE damage and create the Fiery Sanctum field. Or if there is a Fiery Sanctum on the field, it will do a leaping attack with AoE damage and moving the field to a new position, but it keeps the same duration. The numbers are not impressive, but the max HP scaling does sort of help. Even if the max HP scaling is only on the field's follow-up attacks that it can do. Oh yeah, that's another thing. The field will do follow-up attacks. Oh yeah, it says it does follow-up damage when an opponent within the field takes damage. And it's based on attack and max HP once every 2.5 seconds. So yeah, that's also a pretty unnecessary nerf. That is so long of an interval between the follow-up attacks. The main draw of the field, though, is its damage mitigation. It can mitigate up to 200% of Dia's maximum HP, and it also will mitigate damage, meaning it will reduce the incoming damage taken at level 9 by 48%. It does cap at level 10, so if you do have the Constellation to boost its level, you won't be getting any extra mitigation above the 50%. Levels 11, 12, and 13 still just mitigate half the damage. But it is an interesting way of tanking, and it plays into the whole style that Dia's signature weapon wants you to play in, which is unshielded. Now we have the Flame Mains Fist. This is just a glorified quick time event. It goes into a rapid fist, a rapid punching attack once you go into it. That lasts about 4 seconds. And if you unleash a Roaring Barrage, which when you're in this state, your normal attack and elemental skill both get replaced with Roaring Barrage. Within 0.4 seconds of each main punch from the attack, the subsequent punches from the main burst will come out faster, so you can get more of them within that 4-second window. Yep, duration 4 seconds, cooldown 18 seconds, energy cost 70. She does have a bit of energy problems, I've been finding out, and once again, these numbers are pretty low. Helped out a little bit by the max HP scaling. As for her constellations, I will actually recommend Dia's Constellation 1. So if you happen to get that, either by just going for it on this banner like I did, or losing enough 50/50s to Dia, it is actually probably her best constellation as far as what its effect is for how easy it is to get. I mean, this will extend the duration of her field by 6 seconds, but let's check again what its current uptime is. Okay, so that will actually give it close to 100% uptime, because it lasts 12 seconds already, and it has a 20-second cooldown. But once again, I will not recommend Constellation 2 because I do not actually have it, so I've not been able to play around with really how big of a difference that it is actually able to make. It also will boost coordinated attacks, but the coordinated attacks come every 2.5 seconds, so 4 of them on the standard duration, and this one really only lets you get a 5th coordinated attack out of it. It's kind of It's kind of lame that it's so infrequent. I didn't really realize until I just read the talent description just now that the duration between coordinated attacks is so long. This is just increases her burst by 3 levels. Slightly reduces her energy requirements. And sort of gives her a little bit of a heal for each. The incineration drive is what replaces your normal and charge, your normal and elemental skill during the burst. So just mashing a normal attack and or elemental skill will probably maximize the upside of this. And that will somewhat reduce her energy requirements a little bit, but as a Constellation 4, it's just not worth it. It'll either take too much money or too long of a time to build up to it. This is her elemental skill by 3. Like I said, the damage mitigation, which is probably the big thing of the field with how infrequent the follow-ups are, is probably the big thing for the skill. And since the damage mitigation caps at 10, this isn't as useful as it seems. And this one is good. It's not amazing like some 5-star C6s are, but once again, because it's a C6, I can't really recommend it. Crit rate of her burst is increased by 10% after the main normal punching attacks that the burst will just throw out automatically hits. It'll get a extra crit damage as well when each one of those Flame Mane's fists scores a crit, and extend the duration by half a second. Can be triggered once every 1/5 of a second. And the duration can be extended for a maximum of 2 extra seconds, increasing the burst duration by 50%, and crit damage can be increased by a maximum of 60%. This Constellation is, in my opinion, the only reason why Dia's signature weapon is a crit rate substat as opposed to an HP, like it probably would have been if it weren't for that C6. We're actually going to work back up now and go into the artifacts before we go and talk about her weapons. And let's just, not artifact details, let's just select a random one and go into the select set. Personally, I think there are only really a couple sets that are usable for Dia right now. Once again, anything in her burst state is not considered skill, normal attack, or anything. It's just considered burst damage. So Gladiator's Finale, which is something I was considering prior to the release of her banner, is not something I would consider now because of just how, well, meh her normal attacks are. Of course, I'd say right now her best is Crimson Witch. But even then, that's iffy because the debate's still open as to whether Dia is meant to be a DPS or meant to be a support with the damage mitigation from her field. And I guess it can do follow-up attacks every 2.5 seconds, but that's really slow. And aside from that, I do think the only other sets that could be usable on Dia, maybe because Dia's just going to take damage anyway during her burst. But no, now that I think about it, I believe that just buffs like normal charge and plunge damage, which once again, the burst is not considered that. Wait, no, that's just flat out attack. So maybe Vermilion Hereafter could do something if you're really wanting to do a DPS Dia. Maximizing her burst uptime and damage from the burst would be Emblem of Severed Fate and leaning more into the energy recharge side of things. Because the HP scaling does mean you can ignore the attack mostly, and you probably want to ignore the attack mostly if you're building a support with like burst damage Dia. It's like her burst does scale off her max HP as well. So I guess Emblem of Severed Fate could be okay for Dia. I'm running her on Crimson Witch and hoping that she gets the Kokomi effect, where her artifacts seem a little wonky right now because we simply don't have the artifact set that's intended for Dia yet. But, and that could actually be coming very soon here because I figured out a pattern as to when they release new artifact sets. They always release new artifact sets when a new region comes out. So every 0.0 update we get, like 2.0 had an artifact domain, 3.0 had an artifact domain. So 4.0 will likely also have an artifact domain. But aside from that, It seems to be new artifact domain, then 2 patches without a new artifact domain, then another new artifact domain. Our last new artifact domain was in 3.3, and we've now had 3.4 and 3.5 without a new artifact domain, so we are primed for a new artifact domain in version 3.6. So I feel like there might be a dedicated set in there for Dia and a dedicated set in there for Baizhu. As Baizhu has been drip marketed now, I can say that because, well, I've been looking forward to Baizhu for a long time. I'm planning on C6R5ing him day one to make up for the disappointment of not wanting to C6R5 Dia, although I ended up spending almost as much as I do for the average C6R5 because Beacon of the Reed Sea was just that uncooperative. But yeah, so I feel like Dia is going to be getting a new artifact set in version 3.6, hopefully. I don't think if it doesn't come in version 3.6, I think it'll have to wait till 4.3 at the earliest, because 4.0 going to Fontaine is going to be the domain of the Hydro Archon, so they're likely going to be sets that synergize more with Hydro-aligned characters, like maybe even a new 15% Hydro damage 2-piece, and I'm hoping for another 20% HP 2-piece, which in all reality could be beneficial to Dia because of her HP scaling. But I'm really thinking she's going to get something dedicated for her in the 3.6 domain because this character is underwhelming. People have been complaining to Hoyoverse, and we've actually basically gotten a statement back from Hoyoverse. Yes, we're listening, wait and see, basically. So I'm hoping something good's coming in the way of artifacts for Dia down the road. But now let's get into Dia's weapon. Of course, I would say Beacon of the Reed Sea is Dia's best in slot because it does give her crit rate, which is always helpful. It is also just the first 5-star Claymore with any amount of crit rate on it, and it does give her max HP when not protected by a shield. And seeing as there's plenty good healing to make up for even the best of best shielders these days, that's not quite as big an imposition as it would have been, say, back in version 1.x Genshin prior to the release of characters like Kokomi. It's like, I mean, you had Barbara and you had Chi-Chi, but even if Kokomi had to wait until the Kokomi effect took place to be seen as good, Kokomi is really the first really good healer we had. Other 5 stars that could be useful on her, Wolf's Gravestone does have support utility, so if Dia makes... I believe Wolfish Tracker can trigger even off the field, so I believe if Dia makes a follow-up attack with her field against an enemy that's in that less than 30% threshold, she will buff the party, including the active field. I don't know if that's true or not, but even so, you can just have Dia proc it herself when she like sets up the field and then switch to your DPS. So I suppose... Well, I have every 5-star weapon now, so... yeah, just by looking at these other 5 stars here, I really feel like Wolf's Gravestone is really the only other one that would make sense for Dia. I mean, the Unforged requires shields, so it's kind of antithetical to how Hoyoverse wants Dia to be played, even if how Hoyoverse wants Dia to be played isn't even fully in our view yet, because, well, Dia really feels like a mix of Kokomi and Yaimiko from where she released. Kokomi needed the Ocean-Hued Clam set to really become good, and then really shined once Dendro was introduced. And Yaimiko, while she was a good, serviceable character at launch, really took off with the introduction down the road of Dendro. So Dia feels like she's in a situation where she doesn't have an artifact set, and maybe there will be Hydro characters specifically designed to synergize with her kit and allow Dia to reverse vape, since she can't with Xingqiu or Yelan, as her burst is considered burst damage and not normal attack. But for now, I would say that this definitely clashes with Dia's main playstyle and is just all in all probably the worst 5-star Claymore out there, even worse than the Skyward Pride. Skyward Pride could be useful on a Dia that is trying to run Emblem of Severed Fate, actually, because it is a 5-star Claymore with a significant amount of energy recharge on it. And I'm checking other Claymores. Okay, and aside from maybe the Katsuragi Nagamasa, it might even have the most energy recharge of any Claymore. Like, this might be second most, but once again, this is just a weird weapon. I don't know anyone who wants it. Red Horn scales off defense. You don't want to be spreading Dia too thin, trying to maximize Red Horn. And trying to maximize her already built-in split scaling. I mean, technically, Song of Broken Pines is maybe a reason to try and make physical Dia. I mean, her normal attack does hit pretty hard. I've seen some 13k non-crits out of it already. So maybe with Mika also being a dedicated physical support, that makes a path of superconduct. You can just add in a good Electro support like Shinobu or Raiden and just go to town with a physical Dia maybe. But I would still recommend, if you have it, Beacon of the Reed Sea. And if you don't have it but have a Gravestone lying around and really want to use Dia, Dia could possibly use Gravestone off field. If Gravestone can even be procced from off field. I think it can, because I think Gravestone's a pretty good beta weapon and she's mostly off field. As for 4 stars go, though, I would normally say on a character who does a lot of burst damage that the Akamaru could be used there. But I feel like the attack percent is mostly wasted on Dia because her attack multipliers are so low. Particularly compared to like other bursts. Like, I think Dia's raw burst numbers is like a 1/6 of Ayaka's raw burst numbers, just for comparison between the DPS units. Yeah. Oh, no. Greatsword definitely has the best energy recharge. I forgot about you. But yeah, Greatsword is as useful for any support, but I feel like as far as the 2 support energy recharge claymores go, Sacrificial Greatsword has more uses than the Favonius Greatsword, due to the fact that Dia has like 60% uptime on her elemental skill, and this will boost that uptime by just giving you like 2 chances to reset its cooldown. Oh, and one other honorable mention I do want to talk about here with Dia is actually the Serpent Spine. Because Dia is in a unique position that makes her probably one of the characters best suited to utilizing it. Because Dia will just take less drawback from the whole drawback of taking more damage per stack, because it'll get mitigated. Sure, she's probably not as good a user for it as someone like Noelle or Ito, the Geo Claymores that have easy access to shielding, either Noelle through her skill, or Ito through just throwing a cow at an enemy that happens to be standing inside Bennett's circle, and getting the Crystallized Shard, but yeah, she will take less extra damage from the more damage per stack, and I believe... Let's enhance. We'll go into the enhance menu. Yeah, it slightly decreases the amount of extra damage you take. I believe that'll mean it'll be at 1.8 per stack at max refinement, because it's being reduced by 0.3% per refinement here. It'll go up to, I want to say 10% more and 1.8 more, but once again, that is a battle pass weapon, so not everyone's going to spend money on that. Yeah, so that's my review on Dia's weapons. Let's just show off my Dia stats here briefly. I have swapped around some artifacts a little bit, so instead of having the gargantuan, like 82% crit rate she had before, she has the slightly less gargantuan 78.1%, but slightly more crit damage. I mean, she doesn't have the perfect 2-to-1 ratio from her artifacts anymore. It's like a 4/10 instead of a 1/2, or like a 2/5 instead of a 1/2 like you really want for those. But yeah, that's a gargantuan crit stat, which I'm running her with Rosaria right now. So when Rosaria's burst is down, my Rosaria has perfect crit rate. Well, a little overstated into crit rate, but you get what I mean. It'll give the full 15 when her burst down, bringing Dia up to a whopping 93% crit rate. Her energy recharge is good for a DPS character, but because of her energy problems, she does still, well, have energy problems. Once again, she has a Pyro Goblet and is getting the 2-piece Crimson Witch bonus. I'm hoping there's a better artifact set for Dia here soon, one that's more specifically tailored to her. Yeah, I always knew that Dia was kind of going to get the short end of the stick just based on being a Pyro character from Sumeru. And the fact that Sumeru characters have mostly been built around elemental mastery, but Hoyoverse seems to be scared of giving Pyro characters any sort of elemental mastery scaling. So I always knew Dia was either going to be niche or underwhelming, but I was honestly hoping for more of niche. Like, I was hoping Dia would be a Nilou, but for burning, where she mega buffs burning, but only if your party consists entirely of Dendro and Pyro characters, so you can't really abuse the elemental mastery stacking you want on your Dia with Vaporize without giving up, well, the main part of her kit. Yeah, Nilou can put up some big numbers with like vape nuke showcases, so of course Dia would have been able to do the same there as well, but at least having something that makes her a burning specialist would have given her more identity than just being a weird damage mitigation tank. Oh yeah, her personal talents. Let's start with the exploration one. This is actually really cool. This is the inverse of Rosaria's, where you get 10% extra movement speed during the day. So also with running her with Rosaria, I just always have this 10% extra movement speed. Her A1 passive is within 6 seconds after Dia retrieves the Fiery Sanctum. This is the, she will take 60% less damage and can be triggered once every 2 seconds. So basically, whenever you use the second hit of Molten Inferno or this, you will take 60% less damage and can be triggered once every 2 seconds. And yeah, it lasts 6 seconds. That's what the within 6 seconds means. Within 9 seconds after... And within 9 seconds after setting up the first hit of Molten Inferno, she will grant all party members the insert name here state. It will further increase resistance to interruption, and that can be activated once every 18 seconds. Stalwart and True is just when Dia drops below 40% HP, she will immediately recover 20% of her max and will restore 6% every 2 seconds for the next 10 seconds, for a total of 30 additional percent over the next 10 seconds. So that will be a total of 50% over 10 seconds once every 20 seconds, once again, playing into her awkward damage mitigation tanking. Now, my brief update to my Cyno review from when he first released is, well, Cyno's weapon assessment remains the same. Let's just briefly go over that. I'm just going to say, keep him on Staff of the Scarlet Sands if you have it. I suppose Engulfing Lightning can fix some of his energy problems if you're having that. And as always, Staff of Homa is just well broken. But on Cyno, it definitely is just more of a stat stick than anything else, because he doesn't have any HP scaling like Zhongli and Hu Tao, my 2 Homa wielders, do. Once again, this event polearm from the version 3.1 event, if you have it, was tailored towards Cyno as a free-to-play option for him, so it is usable there as well. Battle Pass weapon, always good option. Black Cliff weapon, always just a good stat stick, particularly for someone who's supposed to be a mob clearer like Cyno is. I mean, Dragon's Bane has a lot of elemental mastery on him, and that'll help him out with Aggravate. Unfortunately, he has other problems in his kit that reduce his ability to Aggravate. That's my weapons review of him. Artifacts. Use either Gilded Dreams or Thundering Fury on him. Either one works. I prefer Thundering Fury over Gilded, mostly because I have characters elsewhere that would prefer Gilded Dreams that I would rather have Gilded Dreams on and not have to work up yet another Gilded Dream set to put on Cyno. Constellation. This is alright. You need his first passive talent. It just makes him attack faster whenever you hit his quick time event during his burst. This one here just increases his electro attack, his electro damage bonus whenever his normal attacks hit opponents. Maxes out at 5 stacks for 50%. The rest of these I won't really comment on too much. Is this extra level to burst, extra level to skill. This lets him battery every character except him. When he triggers reactions, he will restore 3 energy for party members except himself. That is the big except here. That makes it not as good as it could have been. And it can occur 5 times, so it is 15 energy times 3 for a full party of 4. For 45 energy restored to the party, except himself. And his C6 just modifies the quick time event yet again. When he hits the quick time event, he will gain 4 stacks of Day of the Jackal. Quite a fancy sounding name. When he hits opponents with the normal attacks, he'll consume 1 stack to fire off 1 Duststalker bolt, which is the reward for, well, extra Duststalker bolts are the reward for hitting the quick time event. Day of the Jackal lasts for 8 seconds and has a max of 8 stacks, so you can store up 2 quick time events worth. It'll be cancelled once the burst ends, and only 1 can be unleashed this way every 0.4 seconds. You do need the passive talent to unlock the quick time events to use this. So yeah, I won't recommend either. I definitely won't recommend this because it doesn't let him battery himself, and I won't recommend this because C6s are expensive and you have to go through this to get to it. As for talent recommendations, you in all seriousness don't need to level up his normal attacks at all. I just like it at 6 so he doesn't hit like a wet noodle if he's just accidentally on the field longer than he needs to be. But just don't waste your resources on his Invoker Spear. All the damage comes from these numbers here, because it just completely replaces his normal attacks with new normal attacks that still count as normal attacks, so don't try and use them with Emblem of Severed Fate, because it won't be, because it's not considered burst damage. This is a skill that I would consider crowning. This is also good to level up because you will be using this a lot during his burst, because in order to trigger the quick time events from Featherfall Judgment, you need to activate this when the purple eye glyph appears on the screen. Quick overview of Cyno there, yeah. Quick and done. Now, the things that have actually sort of boosted Cyno's potential a little bit is just that we have more Dendro options. You can now run Cyno in an Aggravate Shell more safely with Fischl, due to the fact that we now have a Dendro healer in Yao Yao. Her Uguay lasts most of Cyno's burst duration, and unlike Nahida's E, it is not something that applies onto an enemy, but instead you just throw it out onto the ground and it will last its full duration no matter what. So you can now more safely run Cyno with Fischl, as you don't need your second Electro slot for an Electro healer. And you can then use your Anemo slot still for someone like Sucrose or Kazuha, who is more adept at getting swirls than our Anemo healers in the form of Jean and Sayuar. The other Dendro elephant in the room, I'm not really going to mention Alhaitham here because he doesn't really do much off-field, is Nahida. Nahida does help Cyno out a little bit, but mostly for his potential against bosses and single-target situations, because the fact that Nahida's talent, All Schemes to Know, does apply to the actual enemies, not to Cyno himself, or not sitting around on the ground like Uguay with Yao Yao. As such, if you are trying to use this in a mob clearing situation, you'll be able to apply this to the first wave of mobs and cut through them pretty quickly, like likely in only 1 or 2 attacks from Cyno's burst, because with this All Schemes to Know, when one enemy marked by it gets hit by a reaction, they all get hit by a big burst of Dendro damage, meaning Cyno will clear out the trash very quickly. But it does actually help against bosses and like boss kill chambers and Abyss, because the mark does last a long time. It lasts 25 seconds, which is longer than Cyno's burst duration, but once again, it applies to the enemy, so if you're trying to use it against crowd situations where there's lots of small enemies that are gonna die very quickly once they're getting hit by reactions marked by this mark here, you're going to be having to switch off a Cyno and wasting his burst duration to reapply this, which in some ways isn't a bad thing, but it also means that you're gonna have more downtime on Cyno than you would actually be used to. What I'd say Cyno needs to be really, really good is Cyno needs something that functions similarly to Raiden's E here, where it lasts 25 seconds. Wow, I thought it only lasted 20. Where it lasts longer than the duration of Cyno's burst, does Dendro damage or does like Dendro follow-up attacks alongside Cyno, sort of like how this will give you an Electro follow-up attack, which makes Raiden really good for someone like Tignari or Alhaitham, who really wants to spread. But we just need something that does follow-up Dendro attacks, lasts longer than the burst, and gets applied to Cyno. I would even stand for gets applied to Cyno and does follow-up attacks, even if its duration isn't quite as long as the burst, even if it's comparable to Yao Yao, because you still have some time where you're able to aggravate and all that after you're done actively applying Dendro, and you could maybe even get through an entire burst cycle before you need to go back and reset things up. But really what Cyno needs is something that applies to him and does follow-up Dendro damage the way that Raiden here applies to the character and deals follow-up Electro damage. So that's really what Cyno needs to be catapulted into the top tier. Here's a brief look at my Cyno stats. Respectable crit rate at 67.4, respectable crit damage at 177.8, decent energy recharge, but once again his burst cost is high enough that without another Electro character he still runs into energy issues. I am not running an Electro damage cup on my Cyno because I do have the Constellation 2, but if you don't have the Constellation 2, you are probably going to want to run an Electro damage cup on your Cyno. Now, I was going to do an Abyss 12 run to showcase teams that use Dia and Cyno, but one, Dia's way too weak. Dia's really fun. I really enjoy Dia's playstyle, but her numbers are too low, so I don't think I'll even really be using Dia when the Abyss does reset. But also, the Abyss reset on the 1st of March because the patch did not go live until after server reset in China on the 1st. The Abyss for this cycle is still the 3.4 Abyss. And the 3.4 Abyss, while somewhat friendly towards Cyno, is definitely not Dia friendly. So, this is where I'm going to leave off this review of Dia and updated Cyno. Updated Cyno guide, because, well, I will once again say Dia's playstyle is fun, fluid, her numbers are low. Cyno has all the makings of a good kit, he just doesn't have quite the right supports yet to really fully utilize that. So, if you found this informative, do make sure to leave a like, WhalePod, and I do thank you very much for watching. Do also consider subbing to the channel if you have not done so already. I am trying to make a career out of YouTube, and each sub is a step in the right direction. As always, comments are welcome down below, so do feel free to let me know what you think about Dia and Cyno down there, as well as just feel free to just say, hey, I do after all enjoy hearing from all y'all. Now, with the business side of things out of the way, I hope you guys are all having fantastic days. Make sure to stay cool, stay classy, and most importantly, remember that waifu over meta is life. And just pull for whoever you want, and, well, don't worry about Abyss because, well, even as the quote-quote hardest content will get, it's not that hard. But until next time, this is Captain Whale, signing off.